The crystal vase shattered against the marble wall, sending razor-sharp fragments skittering across the floor like deadly snow. Ella's diamond-ringed hand was still raised, her face a mask of calculated rage as she stared down at the trembling maid who had folded a napkin incorrectly. "Do it again!" Ella hissed, her voice like a blade wrapped in silk, cutting through the terrified silence of the 20 staff members assembled in the Romano mansion's formal dining room. "And this time, if it's wrong, you lose more than your job." The young woman, barely 20, her hands shaking so badly she could hardly grip the linen, began refolding with tears streaming down her face. Blood dripped from a cut on her temple where a vase fragment had struck her. No one moved to help her, no one even breathed too loudly. They all knew better than to draw attention when Ella Romani was conducting one of her inspections. She was the wife of Rufino Romano, the most powerful mafia boss in Seoul, a man whose empire stretched from Korean ports to Italian vineyards to Chinese manufacturing, and she wielded that position like a weapon sharpened on the bones of anyone foolish enough to displease her. Ella. Rufino's deep voice cut through the tension as he appeared in the doorway, his tailored charcoal suit fitting his frame with the precision of armor. His handsome face, marked by a distinctive neck tattoo that disappeared beneath his collar, showed no emotion, but his dark eyes held something the staff had learned to recognize: barely controlled irritation. "We have guests arriving in an hour. Perhaps this can wait." Ella's expression transformed instantly into a sweet smile, though her eyes remained ice-cold. "I was simply ensuring our household maintains the standards your reputation demands, my love. Surely you understand the importance of excellence." From the servants' entrance at the far end of the room, partially hidden behind a marble column, Christina Brown watched the entire exchange with her heart pounding against her ribs. She had arrived in Seoul just 3 days ago, exhausted from the 16-hour flight from Atlanta, desperate for work after her nursing license had been suspended pending investigation into medication theft she hadn't committed. The International Placement Agency had promised her excellent pay as a domestic worker for a wealthy Korean-Italian family. They hadn't mentioned that the family was a criminal empire, or that the lady of the house was a monster who wore Chanel and cruelty with equal comfort. "Remember why you're here," Christina told herself, touching the small cross pendant her grandmother had given her before she died. She needed this job. Marcus's legal fees weren't going to pay themselves, and her little brother was sitting in a Georgia prison for a crime he didn't commit, while his public defender slept through court appearances. The $3,000 a month this position offered was more than she'd made as a nurse, and it came with room and board. It was her only chance to hire a real lawyer to save the only family she had left. The head housekeeper, Mrs. Kim, materialized beside her like a ghost, the elderly Korean woman's face carved from stone. "You start tomorrow, 5 a.m. sharp, and listen very carefully, Miss Brown." She gripped Christina's arm with surprising strength. "In this house there are 3 rules. Keep your head down, do your work perfectly, and stay invisible." "The wife?" Mrs. Kim's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "The wife enjoys breaking people who stand out. And you?" She gestured at Christina's natural afro, her dark skin, her height that made her tower over most of the Korean staff. "You will stand out, so you must disappear even harder. Understand?" Christina nodded. Though every instinct she had, every value her grandmother had instilled, every principle she'd learned caring for the vulnerable and defenseless, screamed against the idea of staying silent while someone was hurt. In the dining room, Ella had dismissed the bleeding maid with a wave of her hand. The girls scurried out, still crying, and Christina's nursing training automatically catalogued the injury. Superficial laceration, likely won't need stitches but should be cleaned and monitored for infection. She started to move forward to offer help, but Mrs. Kim's grip tightened. "No," the housekeeper breathed. "That's exactly what I meant. Don't." But Christina had already been seen. Rufino Romano's eyes had tracked her movement, caught her moment of instinct, and now he was looking directly at her across the expanse of imported marble and priceless art. His expression didn't change, but something in his gaze shifted. Curiosity maybe, or recognition. He'd noticed her when everyone else was trained to be invisible, and in the Romano household, being noticed was either the beginning of something extraordinary or the fastest path to destruction. Christina's first morning began at 4:47 a.m., 13 minutes before her alarm, because her body refused to sleep in a room where the silence felt like held breath. The servants' quarters were clean, functional, and utterly devoid of personality. White walls, narrow bed, small desk, bathroom barely large enough to turn around in. Like a very expensive prison cell. She dressed in the uniform Mrs. Kim had provided. Black dress, white apron, sensible shoes that would survive 12 hours on marble floors. In the mirror, she looked like every period drama's vision of domestic service, except her skin was several shades darker than any drama she'd seen had ever cast. Invisible, she reminded herself. That's the goal. Disappear into the work. The staff dining hall was already full when she arrived at 5 a.m. Sharp, 23 people ranging from their early 20s to Mrs. Kim's 60-something, all moving with the choreographed precision of soldiers who'd drilled together for years. Christina stood in the doorway, suddenly aware that every eye in the room was on her and not one face looked welcoming. "New girl," Mrs. Kim's voice cut through the whispers. "This is Christina Brown. She's American. She speaks English and Korean. Apparently she studied languages before becoming a nurse." The way she said nurse made it sound like a questionable profession. "She'll be training under me for kitchen and housekeeping duties. I expect you all to teach her our standards." Christina bowed. She'd practiced the angle, the duration, everything, and murmured the Korean greeting she'd rehearsed. "Please take care of me." The response was a mixture of returned bows and stony silence. She'd expected some xenophobia. Atlanta had taught her that looking different made some people uncomfortable, but this felt like something else, like fear extending to anyone new, anyone who might disrupt the careful balance that kept them all alive. Breakfast was rice, soup, and silence. Christina ate quickly, watching the others, learning the unspoken rules. Where people sat, who spoke to whom, how they moved around each other with the careful distance of survivors who'd seen what happened to those who got too close to the wrong person. "Mrs. Romano will inspect the dining room at 7 a.m., Mrs. Kim announced as they finished. "That gives us less than 2 hours to have it perfect. Christina, you'll observe today. Tomorrow, you'll participate. Watch how Ji-yoon polishes the silver. One smudge, one fingerprint, and Mrs. Romano will notice." The young woman who'd been crying yesterday, Ji-yoon apparently, was back at work despite the bandage on her temple. She moved like a person who'd learned to be silent, to be small, to avoid attracting attention. Christina wanted to ask if she was okay, if anyone had actually cleaned and dressed that wound properly, but the set of Ji-yoon's shoulders warned against conversation. The dining room was already immaculate. Christina had seen hospital operating rooms with more visible dirt, but for the next 90 minutes the staff cleaned it with the intensity of people preparing for military inspection. Every crystal glass was polished until it disappeared in the light. Every piece of silverware was examined for invisible flaws. The flower arrangement was adjusted 17 times until Mrs. Kim decided the roses sat at the exact correct angle. At 6:58 a.m., they lined up against the wall, hands clasped in front of them, eyes down. At 7 a.m. exactly, Ella Romani entered, and the temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. She was beautiful in the way that expensive things are beautiful, perfectly maintained, flawlessly presented, cold as a diamond. Her black dress probably cost more than Christina would earn in 6 months. Her hair was pulled back so tightly it looked painful. Her makeup was airbrushed perfection, except for her eyes, which held all the warmth of a snake evaluating prey. "Good morning," Ella said, her voice pleasant, almost friendly. That made it worse somehow. "Good morning, Mrs. Romano," the staff replied in unison, bowing in synchronized precision. Ella walked the length of the dining table slowly, running one finger along surfaces, examining flowers, lifting a water glass to the light. No one moved. No one even seemed to breathe. Christina, standing at the end of the line between Mrs. Kim and a young man named Minho, felt sweat forming at the base of her spine despite the air conditioning. "The roses are wilting," Ella observed, stopping in front of the arrangement that had taken 17 attempts to perfect. "I specifically requested fresh flowers daily. These were clearly cut yesterday." My apologies, Mrs. Romano, Mrs. Kim said, her voice steady despite the tension radiating from her. I will have them replaced immediately. Will you? Ella picked up the vase, crystal, probably priceless, and studied it. Or will you simply make excuses about the florist, about timing, about the impossible standards I apparently maintain? No excuses, ma'am. Only correction. Ella set the vase down, but her fingers lingered on it. And who is responsible for the flowers? Whose task is it to ensure my home looks appropriate? A young man 3 people down from Christina, he couldn't have been more than 19, raised his hand slightly. It's my responsibility, Mrs. Romano. I'm very sorry. Sorry, Ella smiled, and it was the most terrifying expression Christina had ever seen. Sorry doesn't fix dead flowers, does it? Sorry doesn't make my guests see a household run with excellence. Sorry is what people say when they're incompetent. She picked up the vase again, and Christina knew, the same way she'd known when a patient's vitals were about to crash, the same instinct that had saved lives in emergency rooms. She knew what was about to happen. The young man knew too. He flinched before Ella even moved. The vase flew across the room with shocking force, striking the wall beside his head. It exploded on impact, crystal shards spraying across the marble like deadly snow, several pieces slicing into his face and neck. He cried out, stumbling backward, blood immediately streaming from multiple cuts. Clean it up, Ella said calmly, as if she'd simply dropped a napkin. And then pack your things. You're fired. The young man stood frozen, blood dripping onto his white shirt, shock rendering him immobile. The other staff members didn't move, didn't rush to help, didn't protest the violence, didn't even look at him. They just stood there, eyes down, accepting this as normal. Christina's body moved before her brain caught up. She stepped forward, out of line, her nursing instincts overriding every warning Mrs. Kim had given her. He needs medical attention. Those cuts are deep. He could need stitches, and if glass fragments are embedded... The room went silent. Not the tense silence of before, but the absolute absence of sound that comes when everyone stops breathing simultaneously. Ella turned slowly to look at Christina. Really look at her, taking in her height, her skin, her hair, her audacity to speak without permission. And you are? Christina Brown, ma'am. I'm new, I arrived 3 days ago, and I'm a registered nurse, so I can see that he needs immediate... A nurse. Ella's smile sharpened into something that would draw blood if you touched it. How fascinating, and in your professional opinion, should I care? Christina had faced down angry patients, hostile family members, doctors with God complexes, and hospital administrators who valued insurance codes over human life. She'd learned to stand her ground with politeness, to assert expertise without aggression, to advocate for the vulnerable without making herself a target. But she'd never faced anything like Ella Romani. Yes, ma'am, Christina said quietly, carefully. Because if those wounds get infected, he won't be able to work. And if there's scarring from improper treatment, it reflects on your household's care for its staff. It was a calculated response, appealing to Ella's vanity and sense of propriety rather than basic human decency. Christina had learned in the ER that some people would never be moved by compassion, but could be manipulated by pride. Ella stared at her for 10 seconds that felt like 10 hours. Then she laughed. A sound like breaking glass. How refreshing, an American who thinks she understands how things work here. She walked toward Christina with the languid grace of a predator who knew the prey couldn't run. Tell me, nurse, in America, do servants speak to their employers this way? Do they interrupt? Do they presume to give advice? No, ma'am. Christina held her ground, though every instinct screamed to step back. I apologize for speaking out of turn. But I've taken an oath to do no harm and to help those who need medical attention. I can't just watch someone bleed and stay silent. Can't you? Ella was close enough now that Christina could smell her perfume, something expensive that probably cost more than Christina's entire wardrobe. How noble, how principled, how utterly American. She reached out and touched Christina's cross pendant, the gesture somehow more violent than throwing the vase had been. And this? You think your faith protects you? That your morality matters in this house? No, ma'am. I think doing the right thing matters, regardless of where I am. The slap came fast. Ella's diamond ring cutting into Christina's cheek, the force of it snapping her head to the side. The pain was sharp, immediate, but Christina didn't touch her face, didn't cry out. She'd grown up in neighborhoods where showing pain was showing weakness, and weakness was fatal. She just straightened up and met Ella's eyes directly. Interesting, Ella murmured. You don't cry, you don't apologize, you just stand there. She studied Christina like a scientist examining a new specimen. Mrs. Kim, is this the one you said would be invisible? Yes, Mrs. Romano. The housekeeper's voice was tight with barely suppressed terror. I will ensure she understands our protocols better. Will you? Ella stepped back, her expression thoughtful now, rather than angry. Actually, I have a better idea. This American nurse who can't stay silent, who can't stay invisible, who thinks she knows better than everyone else, she'll be my personal project. I want her assigned to my direct service. She'll attend me during my social obligations, help with my wardrobe, manage my schedule. Let's see how long her principles last when she's close enough to really see how this household operates. Mrs. Kim made a sound like she'd been struck. Mrs. Romano, perhaps... Are you questioning me? No, ma'am, of course not. Good. Ella turned back to Christina, her smile returning. You wanted to help? You wanted to use your nursing skills? Fine. You'll help me. And when you inevitably fail to meet my standards, when you make your inevitable mistakes, you'll learn exactly what happens to people who think they're special in this house. She glanced at the young man still bleeding against the wall. Someone clean him up. He can stay. But if I see him again, he's gone. Consider it a gift from our principled new American servant. Ella walked out, leaving silence and blood and a new order that everyone knew had just made Christina's life exponentially more dangerous. Mrs. Kim grabbed Christina's arm the moment the door closed. What were you thinking? What were you possibly... She stopped, noticing the cut on Christina's cheek where Ella's ring had struck. Come, we need to treat that before it scars. But Christina pulled away gently and went to the young man instead, checking his wounds with practiced efficiency, using napkins to apply pressure, cataloging which cuts needed more care. What's your name? Sungmin, he whispered. You shouldn't have done that. She's going to destroy you now. Maybe, Christina said, cleaning a particularly deep cut. But you were bleeding. I couldn't just stand there. Yes, you could have. That's the rule. That's how we survive. Christina met his eyes, young, terrified, grateful despite the fear. I didn't come to Seoul to survive, Sungmin. I came to save my brother, and I'm not going to become someone who watches people bleed just to keep my head down. From the doorway, unseen by any of them, Rufino Romano had watched the entire scene. He'd been about to intervene when Ella threw the vase, his patience with his wife's cruelty wearing thinner by the day. But then the new American maid had stepped forward, had spoken up, had taken a hit, and stayed standing. Interesting. Most people in his household had learned to be invisible, to accept violence as the price of employment, to prioritize survival over morality. It was how they stayed alive in a world where loyalty was the only currency that mattered, and weakness was a death sentence. But this woman, Christina Brown, Mrs. Kim had called her, she'd chosen conscience over safety, had defended someone she didn't know, for no reason except that it was right. Rufino had built an empire on reading people, on understanding what motivated them and how to use those motivations. He recognized ambition, fear, greed, desperation. He could work with all of those, but principle, actual, genuine morality, that was rare enough to be valuable and dangerous enough to be interesting. He pulled out his phone and texted his head of security. Background check on Christina Brown, the new American maid. Everything. I want it in 2 hours. Then he slipped away before anyone noticed he'd been watching. Already calculating how this new variable would affect the careful balance he'd maintained between his empire, his wife, and the growing realization that his marriage was becoming more liability than asset. In the dining room, Christina finished tending to Sungmin's wounds, while the other staff members cleaned up the broken crystal with the practiced efficiency of people who'd done this many times before. Mrs. Kim waited until they were alone to speak. "You've made a terrible mistake." "Maybe," Christina agreed, touching her cut cheek. "But at least I can live with myself." "Living with yourself is a luxury you may not be able to afford much longer." The housekeeper's voice was sad rather than angry. "Mrs. Romano doesn't forget, and she doesn't forgive. You've made yourself visible, made yourself a target, and now she's going to enjoy breaking you. That's what she does. She finds the people with principles and she destroys them, slowly, so everyone else can watch and learn what happens when you stand out." Christina thought about Marcus sitting in a prison cell, about her grandmother's voice saying, "Do the right thing even when it costs you," about the oath she'd taken to help people who were hurting. "Then I guess we'll see if I break," she said quietly. Mrs. Kim studied her for a long moment. "You know what frightens me most? I think you might not, and that's going to be even more dangerous than if you did." She was right, but neither of them knew yet that being dangerous to Ella Romani would make Christina invaluable to someone else, someone who'd been waiting for years to find a crack in his wife's armor. Someone who'd just found it in the form of a Black American nurse who refused to stay invisible. Christina's new assignment began the next morning, Ella's personal attendant, which meant standing outside her bedroom at 6 a.m. with imported Italian coffee on a silver tray, waiting for permission to enter a space that felt more like a throne room than a bedroom. 3 days into this hell, Christina was carrying a fresh tray when she collided with someone in the hallway, solid, immovable, smelling of expensive cologne and something darker underneath. The coffee went everywhere, including on Rufino Romano's white dress shirt. "I'm so sorry, Mr. Romano." Christina dropped immediately into the deepest bow she knew, her heart hammering. First Ella's wrath, now this. "It's fine." His voice was deep, calm, almost amused. The shirt was ugly anyway. She looked up, surprised. He was studying her with those dark, unreadable eyes, and up close she could see the tattoo that disappeared beneath his collar continued down his neck, some kind of dragon or serpent design that spoke of allegiances she didn't understand. "You're the nurse," he said. Not a question. The one who spoke up. "Yes, sir." "Come to my study after you've cleaned this up. I want to talk to you." It wasn't a request. Christina's hands shook as she gathered the broken cup pieces, wondering if this was how people got disappeared in his world. Quietly, after a private conversation, never to be mentioned again. 30 minutes later, she knocked on his study door with the kind of dread usually reserved for terminal diagnoses. "Enter." The study was all dark wood and leather. Walls lined with books in Korean, Italian, and English. Rufino sat behind a desk that looked carved from a single piece of mahogany, reviewing documents that Christina was absolutely certain were not legal business contracts. "Sit," he said, not looking up. She sat on the edge of a chair that probably cost more than her nursing school tuition. "My wife has made you her project," Rufino said, finally meeting her eyes. "Do you know what that means?" "That she's going to make my life difficult, sir." "Difficult?" He almost smiled. "That's diplomatic. She's going to try to break you. Everyone she decides to fix either quits within a week or becomes as cruel as she is to survive. Which will you be?" Christina thought about lying, about saying whatever he wanted to hear, but something in his expression suggested he'd know. "Neither, sir. I'm going to do my job, take care of my brother, and try not to give her ammunition." "Honest," he leaned back. "That's rare here, also dangerous." He pulled out a folder, thick, official-looking. "Christina Brown, 29, former ER nurse at Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta. Suspended pending investigation into missing medications. Charges dropped eventually, but license remained suspended. Younger brother Marcus, 23, currently serving time for armed robbery. Public defender. Bad odds." Christina's blood went cold. "How did you— I know everything about everyone in my house. It's how I stay alive." He closed the folder. "The medications, you didn't take them." "No, sir. But you know who did." She did. A doctor she'd worked with, struggling with addiction, who'd used her access codes. She'd kept silent because he had a family, because she believed in second chances, because she'd thought protecting him was the right thing to do. It had cost her everything. "I protected someone who didn't deserve it," she said quietly. Rufino nodded slowly. And your brother? Wrong place, wrong time. His friend had a gun Marcus didn't know about. They got pulled over, friend ran, Marcus got arrested. He's taking a plea deal because we can't afford a real lawyer. How much would a real lawyer cost? Christina's throat tightened. $50,000 for someone good enough to potentially overturn it. I've saved $11,000 in 3 years. Rufino was quiet for a long moment. Then he opened a drawer, pulled out a checkbook, actual paper like something from another era, and started writing. What are you doing? Christina whispered. Paying a debt. He tore out the check, slid it across the desk. $50,000 made out to her. For speaking up when everyone else stayed silent. For having principles in a house where they're liability. Consider it payment for something I hope you'll do in the future. I don't understand. You will. He stood, signaling the meeting was over. Don't tell my wife about this. Don't tell anyone. And Christina, when the time comes, I'm going to ask you to be honest with me about something important. This is me buying that honesty in advance. Christina stared at the check, at more money than she'd ever held, at the price of her brother's freedom written in clean, precise handwriting. Why? She asked. Rufino walked to the window, looking out at the manicured grounds. Because everyone in this house is afraid of the wrong things. They fear my wife. They fear losing their jobs. They fear standing out. But you fear failing someone you love more than you fear anything else. That kind of fear makes people dangerous, useful. And right now, I need someone dangerous on my side. Christina took the check with shaking hands, knowing she'd just accepted more than money. She'd accepted an alliance with a man whose world she didn't understand, against a woman who'd promised to destroy her. But Marcus would be free. And sometimes, that was enough. The dinner party was Ella's masterpiece. 50 of Seoul's elite criminal and political power brokers, 8 courses, and enough tension to choke on. Christina stood against the wall with the other servers, learning that in Ella's world, servants were furniture that occasionally moved. She'd sent Marcus's lawyer the check that morning. He'd called back within an hour, stunned. New trial motions were already being filed. Her brother might be home by Christmas. The thought kept her standing, despite Ella's eyes finding her every few minutes, assessing, calculating when to strike. It happened during the 4th course. Christina was refilling water glasses, moving efficiently around the table when Ella's hand accidentally knocked her wine glass directly into Christina's path. Red wine splashed across Christina's uniform, the white apron now stained crimson. Oh, Ella said with theatrical concern. How clumsy of me, though really, you should have been paying attention. A good servant anticipates accidents. The table went quiet. 50 dangerous people watching to see how the American would respond to being humiliated in front of Seoul's power structure. Christina bowed. My apologies, Mrs. Romano. I'll clean this immediately. Will you? Ella stood, her designer dress pristine, her smile sharp enough to draw blood. Or will you stand there making my guests uncomfortable with your presence? Honestly, the agency promised quality staff, but apparently standards have fallen. Christina felt the heat rising in her face. Not from shame, but from rage she couldn't express. She was about to retreat to the kitchen when Rufino's voice cut through the room. Ella. One word. Quiet. But the temperature dropped 10 degrees. Yes, darling? Ella's voice was honey over steel. The wine was 100,000 won per bottle. You just wasted it making a point. He dabbed his mouth with his napkin, his movements precise, controlled. Perhaps we should discuss the cost of your accidents later, privately. The implication was clear to everyone at the table. Rufino was defending the help, publicly, against his wife. Ella's smile never wavered, but her eyes went flat and dead. Of course, my love. How thoughtful of you to care about waste. Christina fled to the kitchen, her hands shaking, wine dripping down her uniform. Mrs. Kim took one look at her and sighed. He defended you. That's good and terrible. I don't understand this place, Christina whispered. Then let me explain simply. You're now part of a war you didn't know existed. And wars here don't end with apologies. They end with body counts. Chapter 4. The Personal Attendant. The summons came at midnight. Christina was in her room, scrubbing wine stains that wouldn't come out when Mrs. Kim knocked. "Mr. Romano wants to see you. Now." His private office. Christina's stomach dropped. Midnight meetings in a Mafia boss's office never meant anything good. Rufino was alone when she entered, tie loosened, looking exhausted in a way that made him seem almost human. "Sit, please." She sat, noticing the photograph on his desk. A woman who looked nothing like Ella, smiling with genuine warmth. "My mother," he said, catching her gaze. "Dead 10 years. Cancer. She spent her last months in a hospital where the nurses treated her like she was just another patient file. Except one, a Nigerian woman named Ada who held her hand, who sang to her, who made her last days bearable. He poured himself whiskey, didn't offer her any. My mother told me before she died, find people who do the right thing even when it costs them. Those are the ones worth keeping." Christina said nothing, sensing this wasn't a conversation, it was a confession. "I need you to be my personal attendant," Rufino said. "Not Ella's, mine. You'll manage my schedule, accompany me to business meetings, handle my correspondence. It pays triple what you're making now." "Why?" "Because I need someone who isn't terrified of my wife, someone who'll tell me the truth, and because—" He hesitated, something rare crossing his face, vulnerability, "because my mother would have liked you. And I find I miss people she would have liked." Christina thought about Marcus, about the money, about the danger Mrs. Kim had warned about. Then she thought about Rufino defending her at dinner, about the check he'd written, about the fact that everyone in this house was afraid except him. "I accept," she said, "but on one condition, you tell me the truth too, about what I'm really getting into." Rufino smiled, the first genuine expression she'd seen from him. "Deal. And Christina? Welcome to the family business. It's going to be worse than you imagine." He was right, but neither of them knew yet just how much worse it would get. Christina had been Rufino's personal attendant for 3 weeks when Ella cornered her in the third-floor linen closet. The door clicked shut with the finality of a coffin lid, and suddenly the spacious closet felt like a tomb. "We need to have a conversation," Ella said pleasantly, examining her manicure in the dim light. "Woman to woman, about boundaries." Christina's hand found the phone in her pocket, finger hovering over the record button. Something Rufino had taught her. Document everything. In this world, proof is the only currency that matters more than money. She pressed record. "I'm listening, Mrs. Romano." "Are you sleeping with my husband?" "No, ma'am." "But you want to." Not a question. Ella stepped closer, and Christina could smell her perfume mixed with something chemical, dangerous. "I can see it. The way you look at him, the way he looks at you, it's disgusting." "I'm his employee, nothing more." "Liar." Ella's voice went cold, dropping the pleasant facade. "Let me explain."